Welcome. It is the 18th of October, 2025, and being the middle of October, we're in the middle of the fall transition. The lake is starting to transition into from summer into winter. We have some water that's turning over. Fish are starting to scatter, and they are on the move. And there's a couple different things that I've been using to target these fish over the last 2 weeks. As far as the lake level goes, it's currently at we'll call it 4.6 feet below full pool, and it is continuing to fall with the exception of the rain that's expected tomorrow. It's dry in the forecast for the foreseeable future over the next 2 weeks, so I don't see any drastic change in lake level, and it's most likely will continue to fall. An important fact to that, if you're relatively new to this lake and you get on here, we're getting to that point in time where it's a great time to go right around and look at the banks. There's a ton of riprap rock on this lake, which hides what the actual bottom composition is. But right now, the lake level is low enough where you can go see what the bottom composition is. You can find those banks that are solid clay or that are small rock or chunk rock or big rock. And you can annotate it either in your graph or on an old school paper map or in a notes or take pictures with your phone. There's a gazillion ways you can note it. But I would say if you're relatively new to the area and you haven't spent much time doing that this time of the year, that is a very good use of time, particularly if the fish are just being aggravating. That is time well spent that will pay you huge dividends later on into the spring and then even to the early summer as well, when generally we have higher water levels. As far as the water temperature goes, we're currently sitting in the low to mid 70s, depending on the time of the day that you check it and what graph you're checking it on. So we'll call it low to mid 70s. And with the expected cold front, that is going to continue down. We'll probably start seeing some water, at least in some areas on some grass, into the 60s. So with that, the turnover is definitely starting, although it has stabilized later on this week. There was more signs of it earlier in the week and late last week. But the good thing is this lake is big enough and wide enough that you can generally, if you find yourself in an area where the lake is turning over, you can either run downstream and try to get ahead of it or run back upstream and try to get on the other side of it. But it really should not prevent you from catching fish. Just understand, if you find yourself in an area where the water looks just absolutely nasty and the fish aren't wanting to play, don't be afraid this time of year to make a bold move. So that brings me on to two of the baits that have been productive over the last week. So over the last, 2 weeks. Over the last 2 weeks, we have experienced days where high skies and high winds, and we've also had days where high skies and no wind, and then some days with a little bit of cloud cover mixed in. So on the days where it's high skies, high winds, when it was absolutely ripping, let's call it maybe 10, 15 mile an hour winds, there's a bait that comes to mind when the wind is howling that hard and it's difficult to throw almost anything else that's moving, and that is the cast 20 gram OG. So with the sun being out bright, when the wind was howling, I was throwing the reflective series. I do make a couple of slight changes to this bait. I add a swivel and a split ring to the front and a feathered treble hook to the rear. Neither of those are required. That's just my personal preference. I throw this bait on a 7 foot to a 7.5 medium heavy fast rod. A 7-to-1 gear ratio reel, and somewhere between 14 and 20 pound fluorocarbon. This one is put on 20 pound fluorocarbon, and the reason being, this is a heavy bait. We're throwing it on a long rod and it generates a ton of energy. If you try to go to the lower pound test line, you'll oftentimes snap these baits. They're expensive. You don't want to throw them off and have a striper eat it, which I have had happen with actually the maker of this bait in the boat, and that is not cool when you're trying to go retrieve your $50 topwater plug and a 20 pound striper decides to eat it before you can get to it. So to prevent that, I go to 20 pound fluorocarbon. You can throw this on braid if you're a braid guy with topwater. I just stick with the fluorocarbon with running guide trips. It's just a little bit more user friendly. So areas that I'm going to throw this bait in, I'm going to throw them on humps. I'm going to throw them on points and heavy wind-blown banks. As far as the depth goes, I'm going to really kind of look in the fall. I'm going to focus on that 10 to 20 foot range, and then maybe even a tad shallower depending on what's going on. But I will not be afraid to throw this as shallow as 5 feet in the fall and then work it out over 10 to 20 feet of water. With regards to retrieve speed, this is not a walk the dog bait. If you haven't ever used one of these before, The bait is generally controlled with turns of the reel handle. That is the easiest way to do it. And I will go anywhere from a 1 to 3 turns of the reel handle, burning it fast. So a fast single turn, fast 2 turns, fast 3 turns. I'll vary it depending on what the fish on forward-facing sonar are telling me, or just the general mood of the fish as to whether or not I'm going 1 to 3 turns of the reel handle. The other thing that I'll say with that is the length of pause that you're going to let the bait just sit there and bob can play a huge role, arguably sometimes a bigger role in triggering strikes than how many times you're turning the reel handle, because the fish will almost always, I would say 9 out of 10 times, they're going to hit this bait on the pause. And letting it sit there and bob is a key to getting those fish to strike. As a general rule of thumb, the cooler the water, the longer the pause, the warmer the water, the shorter the pause. And that is just a general rule of thumb. It's not a matter of fact. As far as when to start burning the reel handle, I'll let the bait, cast it out there, let it sit there, bob a couple times. It makes a big splash. Sometimes it'll even call fish right in there and you won't even get a chance to make a turn of the reel handle. Otherwise, I'm going to just kind of pick up the slacken that may exist between the rod tip and the bait. Once I feel the weight of the bait on the end of the rod tip, I'm going to burn the reel handle somewhere between 1 and 3 times. The last thing that I want to cover with this is not necessarily a bait that's going to generate a ton of bites, but it can generate some giant bites. And if you're looking for a really big bite and you have any degree of wind, as long as it's not completely slick, you need some wind, it can be effective. But for me, when I reach for this, it is on the days when throwing anything else is just going to be a royal pain in the butt, and I'm looking for that combination of bites and quality bites. That's when I'm going to pick up this. Moving on to where the fish are moving towards. So that bait is, I'm going to focus on areas where they have been for like the last 5 months, maybe just a slight bit shallower, but generally speaking, it's the same geographic feature. Now, moving forward, we've got our old buddy, the Shaky head here. All right, and this is a 3/16 ounce Shaky head, which is my go-to Shaky head on Lanier, and I throw it probably the 80% of the time. I may throw a 1/8 sometimes, and I may go up to a 1/4 sometimes, but a 3/16 is my overall one that I throw. Right now, that is just a KVD finesse worm in the dirt color that I've been throwing recently. The reason being, a lot of the crawfish right now have orange and green mixed, and that combination of pumpkin and watermelon that makes that color up, it kind of resembles the way those crawfish look. Areas that I'm throwing it. If the fish are down in the water column on some of the same areas where I'm throwing the OG, I will target those fish with this bait, particularly if they're swimming around a brush pile, but they're down towards the bottom. They're not showing any signs of actually coming up, then I'll use this. But where it's coming in more common now is basically bank beating. So I'm going to bank beat rocks. I'm going to bank beat clay. I'm going to start fishing docks that are moving back into pockets, and maybe even back into some pockets also. So anywhere where you would traditionally think about throwing a worm, that's where I'm going to throw it. We've got fish that are moving towards the bank, towards the backs of the creeks. They're starting to do that. They're starting to gorge for the winter time. And this is going to represent a crawfish, which is a huge prey species in Lanier, and it represents it. It mimics well. It's relatively easy to throw and can produce a lot of bites and can produce some surprisingly big fish as well. Again, I'm targeting docks, clay, hard clay, and rocks primarily. What I'm not really focusing on at all is sand. I'm also throwing it around brush piles. As far as the tackle that I use for this is a Sacroid Physics. This is a 7-foot medium fast. It is a extremely sensitive rod. It is very light, which is, if I'm going to spend money on a rod, a Shaky head rod is one of the few that I will spend money on. Moving baits, it's not necessary. When it comes to bottom contact baits, I believe it absolutely is. This is the 12-pound cast X12 braid in the 12-pound series, a 8-pound fluorocarbon leader, and a 3000 series spinning reel, which gives me a little bit faster rate of retrieve so I can pick up slack when I go to set the hook. As far as the presentation goes, generally speaking, I'm just dragging it and giving it slight pots. I'm not shaking the ever-living snot out of this. I think overall less is more, And as far as if you're having a problem detecting bites with a shaky head, learn what the shaky head feels like when there's not a fish on there. So learn what it feels like when it's just normally coming across the bottom, what it feels like when it's in rock, what it feels like when it smacks a limb, and then pretty much anything else is a bite. And what often happens with spotted bass, particularly if you're throwing this on deep points, is the bass will pick up this bait. You won't ever feel him pick it up a lot of times, and he will swim straight towards deep water, which means you're going to lose all contact with the bait itself. And if you don't know what the bait just normally feels like when you go to bounce it one time, you'll completely miss those bites until it can oftentimes be too late. So this is something that has been on the deck for the last 2 weeks. It'll be on the deck for the far foreseeable future, probably all the way into May, and will be a staple. So I'm sure you'll see this coming again. As far as looking forward, the fish have been in their summer haunts. They're moving into their fall/winter haunts. So what does this do? It opens up an opportunity where you can catch fish doing almost whatever you want to do. There are fish being caught on crankbaits. There's fish being caught on A-rigs. There's fish being caught on worms, on hard baits, on spinner baits, on hard swim baits, on soft swim baits. They're being caught shallow. They're being caught deep. So it kind of is a situation where you can go fish your strength and what you like to fish. It might not be the ticket, but if there's something you just really want to go do, then by all means, you could probably do it and have a level of confidence that it is going to work, unlike what existed for a large portion of the lake over the course of the summer. So a lot of options are opening up. It's time to be open-minded and think about some different things. So I appreciate the support. If you have any questions, please put them in the comment section. I'll do my best to get them answered. And please do not forget to like and subscribe this so that more individuals can see it and we can try to grow this channel a little bit. So I appreciate the support, and I'll see you soon.